Next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Jeremy Smith here on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council of California. I'd like to thank Senator Woke and all of her colleagues for not only holding this hearing, but staying here the entire time to hear these important matters. We were heartened today to hear, in addition to no tunnels or being against tunnels, some actual conversation about alternatives. So much of what we see on the bumper stickers or the commercials or in other places is just no. Can't just be no. The Delta is in trouble. I think we all agree with that. And we want to make sure everybody realizes that not only do we think that the environmental justice issues, access to clean drinking water, making sure people who live in the Delta can still live in the Delta with whatever choice gets made, make sure those towns and those levees exist. We want to make sure that we mention the economic importance of the Delta. Many of you probably think I'm here because we want to build the tunnels or we want to build whatever is going to be out there for the jobs. Well, that's true. But we do not think that those things are as important as providing clean drinking water and all the things I mentioned a minute ago. But we do want to say that, and remind the members of the committee, is that there is state law that requires anything new that's built in this state has to have an identified water source. So the economic impact of whatever we do to help fix the Delta means that the water flowing through that Delta is going to lead to construction jobs for workers building things that we all want built. New buildings, new roads, new bridges, things that we want done. The water has to be there to actually build things and to provide drinking water to whatever, whoever's going to inhabit whatever's built. So again, I want to make sure everybody understands we want the right answer to get reached. We support the tunnels. We don't believe the economic importance of whatever happens in the Delta is more important than all the issues that have been raised today about how to fix the Delta and people that live in the Delta and providing clean drinking water. But we want to make sure people don't lose sight of the fact that all the water moving through the Delta means something for the economy of California in myriad ways, including construction. So for those reasons, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, Senator Wolk, and thank you for having this committee hearing. My name is Osha Meserve, and I work with a coalition called LAND, Local Agencies of the North Delta, which is reclamation water districts in the northern part of the Delta, and many others. In addition, I work with Stone Lakes National Wildlife Refuge, which is the Friends group, which is just adjacent to the 3 intake tunnels being discussed today. I wanted to address quickly on the earthquake seismic issue. I'm reviewing a conceptual engineering report, which is written for the alternative 4A, which is the water fix alternative, and it clearly identifies that the earthquake risk within all of the Delta, except for the very westernmost portion, is quite low. So it really is a boogeyman in terms of, driving this discussion. Additionally, sea level rise has also been overstated as a reason why we must have these tunnels. According to the modeling by the Army Corps of Engineers, which I'd be happy to share with you, there's quite a bit of variability of sea level rise in the Delta, and it attenuates as you move away from the Golden Gate. So any analysis that assumes that if there's 10 inches at the Golden Gate, there's also 10 inches here in Sacramento or in Clarksburg or in Cortland or wherever else, or down at the South Delta pumps is simply wrong. Of course, we're relying on predictions and modeling, but it's just not best available science to talk in those terms. And it's not because I'm arguing against sea level rise, it's just that there is an attenuation that occurs. Last, I wanted to address quickly, the land districts are certainly under the footprint of the lands that are slated for acquisition and take, and we were, read with interest the acquisition plan that we received from the Public Records Act request from Metropolitan. I have a letter I've brought, which I will give to the committee, regarding from one of the landowners under the footprint of intake number 2, the middle intake, who's been farming in the Delta since the 40s. These are real people that are impacted by these plans, and it's quite disconcerting that Metropolitan is spearheading a property acquisition plan for a supposed alternative that has not been selected or approved, yet at the same time we're being told that the Water Fix and BDCP are considering all these alternatives and nothing has been decided yet. This is very conflicting, and I think that it's important that the legislature provides some oversight to ensure that the process is that there is no predetermined alternative and that people's property is not being slated for take at this time. So we could use your assistance in requesting all of the current documents from DWR because we don't think it's appropriate that Metropolitan would be spearheading this acquisition. And so as has been stated earlier, that's something we could really use the support of the legislature in addition to just more oversight over this project, which I think, as we've heard today, really is not in the best interest of California or the Delta. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Don't know who's next. Who sat down next? We'll start with sir.
I'm Barry Scarella. I'm the CEO of Solagra Corporation. My company's been mentioned several times in the earlier testimony concerning alternative solutions to the current Twin Tunnels project. When I first heard of the Twin Tunnels project, all I heard was, we hate the project. I'm a resident of the Delta. I live on Twitchell Island, so I'm well familiar with what goes on up here. I've been on a reclamation district for Twitchell Island for the last 10 years, so I'm aware of the levee repairs, levee maintenance issues that are required. In looking at the initial BDCP issues, the thing that occurred to me is, and I've shared this comment with many others in the Delta, it's not enough to hate the concept. You need to come up with a better solution. Obviously, a solution is the only thing that's going to potentially overturn what's being essentially shoved down our throat by the state. So I'd like to thank Senator Wolk for having these proceedings, because this is something that we definitely need to get out into the forefront. I just wanted to amplify some of the comments that Craig Wilson made about the West Delta diversion. The issues that we have in the Delta with the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project, typically you have 3.7 million acre feet that goes through the Jones Pumping Plant. For the Central Valley Project, you have up to 2.4 million acre feet that goes through the Banks Pumping Plant into the California Aqueduct for the State Water Project. Dr. Swanson mentioned that the water in the Delta is finite and variable. The question that I ask at this point is, what if it wasn't? What if the water levels in the Delta were predictable? What if they weren't completely finite? And the reason I ask that question is that our plan for the Delta water solution is to create new water. That's the only way you can get away from this problem. Ultimately, we do have a finite amount of water, and as we know right now, we're getting less and less, primarily due to global warming, 4 years of drought, and many other things that we have absolutely no control over. But one thing that we would have control over would be the ability to make new water. There have been assertions, and to some extent they're well-based, that desalination is an expensive process. It's very energy intensive. Our plan is to use a different version of, Craig called it water polishing. The typical salinity level at Antioch down around Sherman Island runs anywhere between 500 and 2,000 parts per million. This compares to seawater concentrations of 35,000 parts per million. So it's much easier to desalinate. So our concept is to first turn off the Banks Pumping Plant. That takes 2.4 million acre feet in an average year that's currently flowing north to south to the pumps and eliminates that flow. You still have the Central Valley Project. It's still pulling water from the Delta in a north-south condition, but you don't have nearly as much. In this case, that 2.4 million acre feet of water would flow down the Sacramento River. We would capture 1.4 million at Sherman Island. we would desalinate an additional 1 million acre-feet, put it into a tunnel that ultimately goes to Bethany Reservoir. We have the ability to completely bypass the Banks pumping plant, put that same 2.4 million in, same situation as we have. Banks could be held in reserve for big gulp conditions. Now we can still put 4.8 million acre-feet of water into the projects when it's available. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, please. And I assume there's no one else who has public testimony? Well, come forward. It's 12 o'clock and I have caucus, so we have to get, so does Senator Hancock, so I'm going to be very strict on the three.
I'll be quick. Good afternoon. And thank you for the Oversight Committee. I think we've seen that this
Identify yourself.
Kyle Jones of Sierra Club, California. I think this is definitely necessary, as we've seen. With the release yesterday of documents, I think what we have is a process where you have an inappropriately biased EIR that is lacking in discussing reasonable alternatives to the projects. We support an alternative that would reduce reliance on the Delta overall by increasing reliance in regions south of the Delta. Just really expanding more on the success that the state's already had in increasing water recycling, capturing stormwater, cleaning up groundwater supplies that have been contaminated and are no longer usable, pushing the bar in conservation, increasing water use efficiency, both through appliances, specifically where we're not seeing as much market penetration through either multi-unit structures who have little incentive to adopt these appliances, or low-income people who don't have the ability to and could really benefit from that. We also support increased agricultural efficiency, the adoption of increased or better technologies, and also using more management, adaptive management strategies that deliver water when it's needed more efficiently. We think that there's just a lot of more low-hanging fruit out there that the state needs to look at, as opposed to just a massive project like this that doesn't even really add up on paper. The Delta shouldn't be treated like a plumbing system that needs new pipes. It should be respected and treasured as the unique ecosystem that it is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next, please.
Madam Chair, Steve Hayes. I'm here as an individual. However, I have been involved in the Cal-Fed Bay Delta program, working with various agencies down in the San Joaquin Valley. And I have to say, this was a wonderful opportunity to hear from other experts as it relates to much more cost-effective alternatives. This concept, the Western Delta intake concept, I think is very worthy of exploration under feasibility study. There are a number of alternatives, my understanding. The other aspect that I like to address is the fact on the salinity, not only for the Delta itself, but in fact through CV salts program through, I believe, the State Water Resources Control Board. 15 million tons of salt are transported through the California Aqueduct, as well as the Delta Mendota Canal. So the Western Delta intake versus where the pumps are located, let alone these very expensive tunnels as proposed. I think, again, salt is a very important aspect as relates to agriculture in the San Joaquin Valley. With that in mind as well, I think there are other opportunities as it relates to a fully integrated water management system. And so the San Joaquin River restoration, the opportunity for higher quality water to flow into the Delta can make contributions as well. And there's within the Bureau of Reclamation and DWR, the recapture and recirculation of water. So again, in an integrated and comprehensive approach. The water, that's say higher quality, that goes down through the California Aqueduct, let alone the DMC, could be the higher flows based on timings that do not impair the environment, but taking advantage of what are called floodwaters, could be recaptured and stored on a temporary basis in the Tulare Lake Basin, which at one time was the largest freshwater body west of the Mississippi River. The impairment of it is very critical and significant, so I see a lot of opportunities here for the whole state of California just by looking at other alternatives than the twin tunnels. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Sir.
Senator Wilk, thank you very much, and committee members. My name is Bill Wells. I'm the Executive Director of the California Delta Chambers and Visitors Bureau. I've been involved in this process since Arnold Schwarzenegger announced his conveyance many years ago that he said would cost about $55 billion. I'm very impressed that Jerry Brown has somehow brought it down to $15 billion. Other experts put it up at around 75. I represent many of the people in the Delta, and I've sat on the BDCP committee for over 2 years on the public part of it. I'm currently a member of the Delta Protection Commission Advisory Committee. I have seen no benefit to anyone in the Delta from these two tunnels. The only benefit I see are going to be to the water exporters, so I strongly oppose them. There are many other alternatives. The Western Delta intake concept is good, but ultimately we need to create new water. The population is increasing, our water supplies seem to be diminishing, so there are plenty of ways to create new water involving converting salt water to seawater to fresh water. One of the earthquake bogey is the thing that they've frequently brought up. When I was on the BDCP committee, they talked about how the Hayward Fault would fail and cause all the levees in the Delta to collapse. The Hayward Fault runs through Oakland and Berkeley. When it fails, those two towns are going to be wiped out if it's strong enough to affect Delta levees. So that's been apparently completely ignored. Also, it's been mentioned before, the California Aqueduct is built on top of the San Andreas Fault, so there's a huge earthquake possibility there. Also, the tunnels, according to the BDCP documents, are going to be held together with gaskets and dowels, so I question their survivability in an earthquake event also. So just one final thing, if I could. The BDCP brought in Nancy Vogel as their publicity person, and they're paying her the same salary as we're paying Jerry Merrill, the gentleman that was running the whole BDCP process. So I question if it is a legitimate process, why you have to spend as much on advertising as you do on engineering. Something's wrong there. So thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. And last, Craig.
Senator Wilk, thank you for holding this hearing, and I appreciate you are my senator, and I appreciate your good representation all these years. One thing we should all realize is that no amount of water that goes south is going to be enough water. It will never be enough water. It will be enough water for this take, and then there'll be another one after that. But one thing I wanted to talk about was water quality, and all water quality isn't equal. We know that the contractors have talked about having these intakes up north, and one of the big benefits would be the better water quality that they would receive, the less treatment costs and so forth. And we also know from the EPA comments that from the last go-around that water quality would not meet the standards it's supposed to in the Delta. But one of my big concerns I don't think I hear addressed enough, and I also am a member of the Delta Protection Commission Advisory Committee, is some of the long-term effects from the dewatering. This dewatering process that goes along the whole route of this new tunnel is going to have the effect of you're going to have to dewater to quite a ways down. We're talking about tunnels that are 150 foot down. And all layers of water within the Delta and within the region are not the same. Different qualities at different levels. And it's the unknown unknowns. That isn't all mapped underground. We don't know. In fact, the groundwater sustainability legislation that was just passed noted that is the situation. We really don't know what's down there conclusively. And what happens when you do something like this is that you're puncturing through several layers of water-bearing strata. And with the process that they're going to be using, you're going to cause a mixing of the water in these different strata. So good water, bad water, all the way down to the bottoms of these dewatering facilities that are going to go, again, along the whole length of this construction process. And what I'm concerned about is what the Delta and our region is going to be left with as a legacy of a project like this is really diminished water quality. And I don't see that discussed enough. I see it shows up in the impacts of the plan, and really it talks about it as an unavoidable impact, and we'll deal with it the best we can when we see what happens. So that's my concern is actually for our region here, and that contains a lot of urban population as well, is what is it going to do to our water quality long term, and there are no assurances in there or any really remedial actions if there is a problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, I want to thank everyone for attending. I appreciate that, the experts that we had, as well as the citizens who have stayed through the hearing and offered their testimony as well. And with that, I will adjourn the meeting.